Oh, hi there. Sorry, I was taking care of some serious business. Speaking of serious business, please enjoy this clip from Mornings with Mike Winters, which, by the way, you can watch the show in its entirety at roswellstalkfm.com.
O'clock, where we are broadcasting live here at the International UFO Museum and Research Center. I got a brain cramp there, sorry. Joining us in studio this morning from Builders Do It Center is Justin Ellis. Morning, Justin. How you doing
Morning,
today?
Mike. I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Doing great. So do you, it's like when you walk up here and look at the inner sanctum of the behind the scenes at the museum and all that stuff, do you look around and be like, well, I could do a project here where they'd shore that up with this, I mean, do you look at it in terms like that? Or do you just walk around and be...
I do. For me, it's more looking at a building like this and going, okay, I know it used to be a theater.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at how is it built. This building's pretty solid for the record. It's kind of a brick.
Yeah. And do you see some of the doors and things from back here are very, I mean, probably 50s and some of those. I mean, this building's been here a lot longer, but some of the decor back there and the doors and things like, man, that was probably from the 50s. And
There is. I'm looking at some of this stuff. My granddad was actually in the business, and I'm wondering very seriously if he was involved in putting some of this in.
It could have been. There is one door that I keep going by, and all I can think of is like the 50s movies, like where it's the private eye guy, like Humphrey Bogart, like with the hat, and he's got the door, and look like it should say private eye on it, and he walks by, you see the shadow, and he's like, here I was late at night with my whiskey. And, you know, that's what it reminded me of. But
It's a special kind of nostalgia right there.
Exactly. But not here to talk about old doors today. That's for another episode.
It is, and would be a very good episode. We'll have to save that one.
Yeah, but that's the museum, the alien thing. First time I heard that, and before the place opened yesterday, I thought it was thunder. For a split second, I was like, man, is that thunder? And then I looked and said, duh, it's the alien thing. So anyway, don't let that bother you.
I can adjust rapidly.
Today, talking about air conditioning, swamp coolers, things like that. I'm thinking folks have realized that if it ain't working, it ain't working by now, because we've had some 100-plus days here, and this is when you find out they're broke, not when it's 35 degrees out.
Exactly. It's amazing how little swamp cooler and air conditioner repair stuff we sell in the month of December. You know,
which really is
virtually none. It may or may not come as a surprise to anybody.
But probably the best time, because I bet you probably the prices are a little cheaper on them that time because the demand's not so much. But
well, here's the other side of this. If you've got to work on the air conditioner, which is outside generally, I'd sure rather do it in the 60-degree weather than the 102-degree weather. But unfortunately, that never works that way.
Unless you're some kind of weird masochist, yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
All right, so let's probably talk swamp coolers first, then we'll get into some of the air conditioning stuff. But swamp coolers, obviously, they're probably a little more owner maintenance than probably refrigerated air or something like that.
Exactly. You know, if you have a swamp cooler at home, chances are pretty good you can do every major repair that needs to be done to that piece of equipment. Doesn't take a lot of special skills. The parts are easily available. The issues are very easy to diagnose. You know, when you go to Central Air, you know, we generally recommend dealing with a professional. There's a lot of moving parts. They're fairly complicated. There's a few things you can do yourself, but you want to leave the big stuff on a Central Air system to a professional.
Right. Plus, there's Freon and things, which that's probably stuff, unless you know what you're doing, probably shouldn't be touching.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not particularly dangerous, but it's easy for you to make a small problem into a big one if you don't know what you're doing.
Sure. So but with swamp coolers, I mean, that's something, and those are... And I've never owned a building that has swamp cooler in it, but I know I've worked in one buildings that have it, and I think I'm in one now, to be honest. But with that, I mean, they don't. During the winter months, you've got to wrap those up and cover them up and kind of winterize them, or you're going to have problems in the summer. There's those big pads on them that you got to kind of keep up with and all that.
Absolutely. You know, swamp coolers are pretty simple. They work on the principle of evaporation. We're going to put some water in a pad. We're going to run air through that pad, and as the air moves through there and evaporates, it brings the temperature of that air down. So it's a pretty simple machine, in all honesty. You have to remember that you have to have electricity to run a pump and a fan, because you have to get air movement and you have to get water movement, and that's really all there is to it. So the key when thinking about swamp coolers is largely maintenance, set up, and then shut down at the end of the season. You mentioned wrapping a swamp cooler at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That is really important for a couple of reasons. One, the winter weather will just beat the snot out of a swamp cooler. Two, basically the way a swamp cooler is built is it goes directly into your home. So that you need to wrap that and make sure that you're not allowing that air inside of the house.
Okay.
You also want to make sure that at the end of the season you take the old pads out, get them out of there, dry out everything thoroughly inside of that cooler. And my recommendation would be to disconnect the supply line for the year so that it doesn't freeze and create any issues down the road. The less water you have in that unit at the end of the year, the better off you're going to be.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Kind of like what you do for, your outside spigots and things, shutting the water off to those so they don't freeze pipes.
Very similar. Absolutely. The other big steps you want to take with those is this is a good time to go ahead and clean those units out. They get a lot of hard water stains and hard water buildup inside of them. And so what you want to do is get some CLR, get a stiff brush, especially if you're here in southeast New Mexico where our water is naturally very minerally, and clean those out. And then once you have that, you may want to think about recoating the interior of that. Now, you can do that in the summer or in the spring when you set up your unit, but going back to the fact that I'd rather work in the 70-degree weather than the 100-degree weather, I personally would rather do it in the fall and be ready for the spring. You can do that with a submarine cooler coating like this product that's sitting behind me. Comes in a spray can or in a paintbrush applied product.
I don't know what camera he's on, but that's the stuff Harry's talking about.
You basically just spray it in the inside of that cooler, and it protects the metal. If you look at a lot of old swamp coolers, they're rusted out. It's because nobody ever recoated the inside. That thing is a tank. It holds water all the time and recirculates, and they do get corroded. This will help prevent that.
Okay, let me ask, because, this is it works as a sealant, but more as a protectant as well.
Yep.
I know there's products that you see on infomercials and things online. If someone tried to use something like that instead, is that a bad move or is that a good move?
They're actually very similar.
Okay.
The difference between this and a product like a spray leak stop, which we sell as well, and they're really amazing products, is that this is specifically intended for that application.
Okay.
A couple of differences. One, it's thicker, so it's going to help absorb some sound, so it'll make your unit quieter. It's specifically designed to be wet all the time. Most of those other products are not formulated for that. They can stand to be wet a lot, in an application that's outside and it's going to get rained on regularly. But there's a big difference between that and being submersed in water.
Holding water, basically.
5 months or 6 months out of the year.
Gotcha.
You could use a spray leak stop product, but I'll be honest with you, cost-wise, there's not a big difference.
Right.
So we generally would recommend going with the product formulated for the job you have at hand.
Gotcha. I just know some people see things and grab things like, oh, that'll work, and just do it. And sometimes that's fine, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah, it won't be wrong. It's just not specifically designed for that.
Gotcha.
So.
Very good. So I imagine we talked about the wrap and things like that. I imagine because the swamp coolers, depending on the models and types you have, sometimes they're good homes for critters in the winter and things like that. So that's another big reason to protect those things and cover them up.
Absolutely. You just want to make sure that you have sealed them up. Some folks will go as far as actually taking the swamp cooler off of the roof and capping it. That's not a bad decision. It's a little labor-intensive, but it's actually a better option than wrapping it.
Gotcha.
Because now you're totally sealing that off from the outside so that you don't have any cold air getting in, critters getting in, anything like that.
Sure, which makes your heating, whatever you're using for heating, work that much harder.
Exactly. That's precisely correct.
Now, I grew up East Coast. I grew up in the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. I got to be honest, till I moved to New Mexico in the mid-'90s, I never even heard of a swamp cooler. I was like, swamp cooler, what's that? And then, to be honest, once I found out what it was, I'm kind of like, this is backwards technology to me. Because, they're ideal for dry climates. If you have any humidity, they're pretty much useless.
Completely.
And at the end of the day, even when they're working optimally, I think, and correct me wrong, the number I've heard is they're only designed to drop the temperature in your home 15 degrees cooler than what is the outdoor temperature, basically.
That's fairly accurate. That's about what you can get out of the evaporative effects. It's about 15 degrees cooler. The advantage is they're very energy efficient. Mm-hmm. They're inexpensive to operate compared to an air conditioner. They work very well in climates like New Mexico, where we're hot but we're not terribly Arizona hot.
Right.
And they work in environments like New Mexico where it's not incredibly humid. Swamp coolers don't exist in most of the country. It's kind of a New Mexico Southwest Texas, parts of Arizona, and Southern California.
Gotcha.
Outside of that, you don't see swamp coolers just because they don't work.
They're not useful. It's
Yeah.
kind of like I think I mentioned this before, but like up in New England area, vinyl siding is very popular because cool. You try to use that here, you're gonna have a bunch of silly putty on the side of your house after a while.
Exactly. It's exactly right. It's a very regional thing, and
Sure.
it works incredibly well here because we don't have a lot of moisture in the air to begin with. Now, if there is a lot of moisture in the air, they don't work because there's no evaporation.
Right.
The water can't get out, and so basically all you're doing is pumping air through water with no evaporation and has no cooling impact. It will make sure in a humid environment that there is more moisture in your house, but that's
Absolutely.
not really a good thing.
That the papers on your desk start curling up and everything else, and it's
Stuff starts growing on the walls, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So now one of the keys to remember because of that, if you do have a swamp cooler, is that you have to have lots of air movement through the home. You want to keep a window cracked or a window open or have
ceiling
some
fans probably help.
Ceiling fans are critical, but you also want to get air out of the house.
Gotcha.
Because you're pumping air into the house constantly. If you don't have a way for that air to get back out, you can run that swamp cooler till the cows come home, but it won't actually bring any air in the home because
Okay.
it's not returning any air. With a central air conditioning system, they're going to bring air in, cool
Makes
that
sense,
air,
yeah.
return it, and reuse that same air that's in the home. With a swamp cooler, it's bringing air in from outside, cooling it, so it needs to go back outside in order to get returned. Otherwise, the system's just going to run and run and run, make lots of noise, and not cool the home at all.
So what's a good rule of thumb? I mean, should you crack a window in each room of the house, or one per house get you covered?
When I lived in a home with a swamp cooler, I don't currently, but I cracked the window in whatever room I was in.
Okay.
Because then I knew the maximum amount of airflow was going to be through the room I was in.
Gotcha.
Which was kind of what I was concerned
So the rule
about.
of thumb is whatever room you're in. I mean, whatever room that's in is going to be the cooler room of the house.
Yes, because then all the air has to go through that room to get out.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. Now, let me ask this before we kind of go over some refrigerator maintenance. As far as someone that has a swamp cooler and they're thinking of getting rid of that and going to refrigerated air, forced air, a different or maybe the ground systems. I forget what they're called off the top of my head. Are we talking a huge, major overhaul to go from swamp cooler to refrigerated air?
Absolutely. In some cases, depending on how your swamp cooler system is set up, you can reuse the ductwork. Partially, you'll still would have to add ductwork because you have to have that return air path that doesn't exist in a swamp cooler system. Sure. It's a significant investment to go from swamp cooler to refrigerated air. I've been through that process. It's actually generally most people will do it because of the heat side, not so much as the cooling side.
Really?
Yeah, because if you have a swamp cooler, you're probably using some sort of indirect or a direct heating system. You've got a radiator or something like that that's not particularly efficient and, frankly, just doesn't work very well.
Right.
So most times when you see people make that conversion, it's because of the heat, and then the refrigerated air is the bonus that actually gets used more in our environment since we only heat about 3 months out of the year, but we cool about 8 months out of the year.
Exactly, yeah. So that's something probably most folks need to talk to a professional on. Unless you happen to work in the HVAC industry, you probably are going to get someone else to do that.
Pretty much. There's a few exceptions to that. There's good window air conditioner units that if you just want to cool one room or something like that, you can use. We do sell some small mini split systems, so they're a packaged unit. They're really good if you have like a garage or a workshop or a man cave, that kind of a small standalone structure that has an indoor unit, an outdoor unit, and all you have to be able to do is hook it up. Those are not bad. We do recommend those. Now, if you're thinking about redoing your entire home, I would highly, highly recommend you talk to a professional. Central air systems have to be balanced. They have a lot of things that impact how they work properly, and if you don't get those right, they won't work, and you'll probably damage the equipment.
What about like the ductless air stuff that you see? Is that pretty efficient, good stuff?
They are. In fact, the mini split system I was just mentioning is another word for that. Mini split or ductless. That's kind of a cutting-edge technology. The Europeans have actually been using it for about 40 years because in their environment they have masonry buildings, and it's not easy to run ductwork. And most of the buildings in Europe weren't originally built with ductwork because they were built prior to the advent of central air. So it's much easier to run a refrigerant line, a quarter-inch diameter refrigerant line, than it is to run a 12-by-12 air duct.
Sure.
The advantage of that is you're moving refrigerant rather than refrigerated air throughout the home. Our building in our Roswell store actually has a split system. We replaced our unit about 3 years ago, and worked with an HVAC contractor here in town with Rhodes Company, who's a good partner and customer of ours, and they designed a system that works very, very well for us. We found it to be highly efficient.
Good deal.
I really like them, in all honesty. They're very advanced compared to what we're used to.
And it sounds like probably if you're going from swamp cooler to something else, but you want something that's more than just a window unit, that's probably the cheaper and more efficient way to go.
It depends on your situation.
Gotcha.
We definitely recommend you talk to a professional. There's a lot of good HVAC contractors here in Roswell. Call a couple of them. I would recommend definitely talking to 2 or 3 different companies and ask them what they recommend for your situation.
Gotcha.
They're the experts. They're going to take a look at what size your home is, what your insulation looks like, and they'll be able to design a piece of equipment that is correctly sized for your home or your business to make sure that you get the most efficient, effective cooling or heating possible.
Perfect. Before we go, definitely want to talk to the folks that own refrigerated air. For me, I'm thinking the biggest thing one person can do is making sure that those filters are replaced monthly, tri-monthly, depending on what the filter calls for. If you take care of that, you're pretty much saving yourself a bunch of headaches.
Absolutely. The biggest issue that you do see with air conditioning systems is that they don't get enough air through the system. And when that happens, it does have impacts. The fans don't run properly, the coils don't run properly, and dirt buildup inside of those systems can be a really bad thing in the long run. The biggest things you can do are replace the filters. Make sure that you have your ducts cleaned from time to time.
Okay.
If you keep a particularly clean house, you can get away with that a lot longer. And if you replace your filters, you can go a number of years without a duct cleaning. If you're like me and you do a poor job of replacing those filters on a regular basis, you may want to have your ducts cleaned more often.
Okay. What's a good rule of thumb? Say you have an average household, say the 2 parents, 2.5 kids, a dog and a cat. What on average, and they say they're semi good at replacing the filters. What 1 year, 2 years, 5 years?
If you have animals, I would say every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
If you don't have animals, you can probably get away with 5.
Okay.
So
good deal.
And if you contact most of those HVAC contractors, that's who would do the duct cleaning. They can actually come out and do an inspection typically and tell you whether or not you're in need of a full duct cleaning prior to you investing in that.
Gotcha. Now, so I guess the good rule of thumb, if you're thinking right now, when's the last time I had that happen, and you can't remember, you probably should go ahead and do it.
You should at least take a look at it. Yeah, it will make your home much cleaner, and it will also make your air conditioning system run much more efficiently.
Sure. And, of course, if you don't, and you're talking about airflow issues, and people talk about airflow, and I know there's some people out there that they solve that by just removing the filter altogether.
Horrible idea.
Yeah, you're just waiting for, it may not happen today, but you're waiting for a big calamity down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. There is junk in the air. There is dust. There is hair. It's just a fact of life. If you don't have a filter in place, instead of getting caught in the filter, that stuff's getting caught in the coil and in the fan of that air conditioning unit.
Sure.
And it can do damage in there. It's not going to hurt anything on the filter. That's why we have the filter, so that we can clean it or throw it away and replace it regularly.
Sure.
You can buy a good quality filter for less than $3. You're talking, if you replace it monthly, an investment of $36 a year. It's going to cost you more than $36 to have a tech come out and look at an issue caused by dust, than never mind actually replacing something that's damaged by that dust.
Sure. Now let me ask you, with those filters, there's as many different types of filters as there are different types of air conditioners out there. As far as folks, that whatever you get a 1 month or 3 month, I know there's washable ones out there. Is there advantages, disadvantages to having a disposable one versus a reusable one?
I'm a fan of the disposable ones.
Okay.
The washables are good. Some people really, really like them. My recommendation with filters is generally not to buy the super low-end ones. We do carry a very inexpensive filter. I don't like them, to be honest with you. I don't think they catch enough stuff. When they get dirty, it impedes airflow. So if you do miss a month, they can be a real issue. And I don't generally recommend the super high-end name brand.
Start naming specific things they filter and all that.
Exactly. Yeah. Unless you are someone who is highly, highly allergic to airborne pollen or airborne allergens. If you are, then I would actually recommend those. They're fantastic. But if you're like most folks and you're just trying to eliminate dog hair, skin cells, dead dust, that sort of thing, I would recommend a $2 to $5 filter.
Okay.
Couple of things to remember is when you go to replace your filters, you need to know what size you need.
Yes.
You can either measure it at home or bring your old filter into the store with you. We carry a lot of different sizes of filters, but if you need a size that we don't have, we can actually order custom-made filters
Perfect.
For your application and have them fairly quickly.
Something I've done before and I don't recommend doing. I have my air conditioning unit has two intakes, two different size filters. One is a pretty common. The other one I've yet to see on a store shelf just there. In the past, I will admit I have done those moves where I take one that's close and trim a couple inches off of it. But really, you're losing a lot if you do that.
You are, because if you don't get that edge solid and tight against the housing, it's going to leak air, which means that dust is just going right around that filter. You can modify them, and if you know what you're doing, you know how to do it, it's actually not a horrible idea.
Okay.
But that said, I'd recommend we just order you the right size next time. It's like $1 more a piece over buying one off the shelf.
And then that way, which is probably a good move, is because, like I said, they're not that expensive, several dollars. Buy 6 months worth at a time. Keep them at the home. That way, you're not running to the store every month or every couple months to do that.
I always recommend buying a case of them. There's only 12 typically in a case. If you're having a special order, special made size, you actually have to buy a whole case.
Gotcha.
But you're still talking less than $60, even if they're $5
and that
a
covers
piece.
you for a year.
And you're good for a year.
Yeah.
And then there's no excuse for not putting them in other than laziness, which is typically my excuse.
Well, here's the move that I recommend too. I know if you have like a wall calendar in your kitchen or whatever, I always do that move where you put the sticker, it's like, okay, that's the date. You go, oh yeah, that's the date we got to do that.
Yep, recurring reminder in Google Calendar is my trick.
That's if you want to go high tech on it, you could do it that way too. But I tend to, for me, because it'll come up and then I'll scroll and forget about it. Whereas that I walk every time I'm like, oh, I want to get a beverage. Oh, big green dot staring at me. I better go do that. So
that works pretty well too.
Yeah. Of course, if you have any questions about anything we're talking about here, even if you want advice on maybe you're making that switch from swamp cooler to refrigerated air, if you need some recommendations on some folks that can do that for you or get you put in the right touch, the right folks, all the staff there at Builders can help you out with that.
Absolutely. If you're troubleshooting an issue with your swamp cooler or AC, come and see us. We can, kind of walk you through what those steps are and help you get the right parts and the right advice to get back into the cool zone.
Absolutely. And then, of course, if you're visiting from out of town here today and you've got a quick fix for something that you need, you talk about the sealants and things like that. They work great in cars and stuff, too, sometimes.
They're awesome on RVs.
Yeah. Come on by the Builders Do It Center. We're on South Main. So if you, for folks in town, if you were downtown here where all the UFO stuff going, just go down South Main. You'll see the big red building there on your right as you're heading south towards the base, and turn on in and stop by for a visit.
We'd love to see you.
Good deal. Justin, anything we missed you want to share?
One last little tip for those of you that have swamp coolers. At the start of the season, you want to think about putting something in that water to preserve it. One of the biggest complaints we hear out of swamp cooler users is their home smell. There's a product called Fresh Air that's sitting right here behind me. It's a little block, and it's made up of some chemicals that treat the water. It will make your cooler last longer, and it will eliminate that odor.
Okay.
I think it's about $7 for the little block. I put one every year when I had a swamp cooler and avoided a lot of issues. It's a very cheap fix to a very common problem.
It's speaking of that, back many moons ago when I worked for Mix 106, we had a station on 2nd Street. There's that thing runs on 4 swamp coolers. But once in a while, you go into one of the office, and for a split second, you think, does it smell like the ocean, like a sea breeze in here? And it turns out it's like pigeon poop I'm smelling. But
yes.
But for a split second, I'm like, it smells like a sea breeze. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's not the ocean.
Yeah. Well, I think that tells you a lot about what the ocean actually smells like.
Valid point. So enjoy your day at the beach, folks.
Yeah, congratulations. Aren't you glad you came to Roswell on vacation instead of the beach?
Although, in fairness, that's probably seagull, not pigeon. But,
True.
Semantics, right? They eat the same stuff.
Flying rats regardless.
There you go. Well, Justin, appreciate you spending time with us today. Now you can go and maybe you can walk around and mingle and just get some food. Maybe that's
Might actually do that.
You help yourself to a donut, but maybe then walk around and just see if you can say, hey, how you doing? And just maybe get in on shots and things. And next you know, you got one of these famous guys down here.
Photobomb a few people. I like it.
Perfect. So, but great. So come on by Builders Do It Center. Whether AC stuff, if you're doing big major projects, if you're doing some upgrades to the backyard, plumbing, anything, you guys got stuff and the resources, info, whether you want to do it yourself or if you're looking for contractors, you guys can help them out.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, Justin, appreciate it. We'll see you here in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Mike.
Talking
Looking
about
forward to
our next fun adventure.